Hello, thanks for joining me. I'm out for a ride today on my Harley-Davidson Dyna Fat Bob, so I thought I'd pull over and give you a quick show around the bike. It's 14 years old and I've done quite a lot to it in that time. And then I'll hop on the bike again, continue a ride, and I'll talk about some of the good things, the bad things, and the ugly things, the good, the bad, the ugly, of Harley-Davidson ownership, long-term Harley-Davidson ownership. So this is my 2008 Dyna Fat Bob. I'll show you the things I've done to it and talk about some of the issues with it. So let's start at the front end here. One of the first things is the paint on the fork stanchions is pretty poor on here. That didn't last very long at all before that started coming off, and so I've just been repainting it. It's just black, so I've just been repainting it with black paint. So about every 2 years or so I have to paint. You can't see it because there's so much dirt on it now, but it's got chips and marks on it. Also, the mud guards, both the front and the back, they're metal, and the paint on them was pretty poor, and so that didn't last long. Started peeling off, and then the underneath the mudguard started rusting, and so eventually, after touching them up and they were starting to look really bad, I got them shot blasted, and they're powder coated, and that's lasted quite a long time now. That's probably lasted about 6-7 years. You see I've put some fork gaiters on here. The headlights, the UK model, so UK model just only has one beam comes on dip, one on main, so I swapped them out for these LED lights, so both lights come on together on both dip and main, and I have to say that was money well spent. The headlights on this thing are now excellent, better than any other bike that I've got. You can see I fitted engine bars on here, and it's got the heavy breather air intake there, and then you can see I've got the Vance & Hines big radius exhausts on there. A major thing I did to it was the footboards. I changed the forward controls for these footboards. See if I can show you a different angle on these. Right, you can see that the footboards here, and these are Harley-Davidson footboards, and they mount on, so they mount, there's two mounting points. The back mount on the forward mounting point here, the brake lever, and the front of the footboard mounts on there, which is where the forward controls would be, and then the back mounts down there, which is where the mic controls would mount. This is the battery box. That's just a bit of my own handiwork. I'm a leather worker, so I put that leather cover on it, and there's something similar on the other side which I'll show you in a minute. And then this is a Harley-Davidson tool roll, which I've had on a few different bikes. I think Harley-Davidson stopped making that quite some time ago. That just fits inside the pillion foot peg there, fastens on the rear fender, and that's useful to put a few things in. And you'll notice down at the front here I've got a tool roll as well, so hopefully you can just see that just down here I've got a tool roll down there, and that's a genuine Harley-Davidson one. Again, I don't think they've made that, probably not made that for years. That's been on quite a few of my bikes over the years. Problem is it does pick up a lot of road dirt just down there where it sits, but again, just useful to throw a few things in. Possibly can't see very well because of all the stuff on here, but I've changed the risers, so these are higher and slightly pull back risers on the bike there. Just brings the handlebars a little bit closer to you when you're riding, which I like. One of the big problems with this bike has always been the clocks. They just get water in them and then they pack in, so I have to say, because I ride a lot in the rain, I ride all through the year, the Speedo is constantly packing in, and that's one of my biggest gripes with Harley-Davidson. They're just not built for riding in UK weather. Another issue with that I'll point out in a moment. one of my biggest complaints with Harley-Davidson stuff is everything weighs a ton. Everything's massively over-engineered and hugely heavy. So I wanted to put a backrest and a luggage rack on. And if you have a look at the Harley-Davidson ones, they're made out of solid metal and they weigh a lot. I don't know how much, but they're very heavy. So I bought this aftermarket one, which is made out of tubular steel. It's been chromed and it doesn't weigh very much at all. So it means I've got my backrest here, I've got my luggage rack without adding vast amounts of weight. Because the problem is with Harley-Davidsons, people tend to buy them and then add and add and add, and you're just adding to the weight on what's already a very heavy bike. You can possibly see in the dirt I've got smoked lenses on the indicators all round, and I've also changed out the rear light here to an LED unit at the back. I had problems with water getting up. This is a common problem of owners of this model bike. There's a circuit board behind the light here, and water and dirt gets flung up underneath the mudguard, which is what the mudguard's there for, but it gets into this circuit board and then corrodes the circuit board, and that packs in. So I had that problem, so I just changed the whole unit out for this LED rear light. Just made life easier. Right on the left hand side of the bike, you can see that's the footboard on this side and the gear changer, so you don't have to change the bike panel. Another issue I've had with the bike over the years is this paint on the engine casing. So if I had to repaint the inner primary, I've had to repaint a couple of times. The outer's not too bad. There's a mark on there that just comes off my boot, I think, just rubbing against that with having my foot there. A major change which I've made to the bike is, you'll see, show you down here, I changed it from belt drive to chain drive. And so in order to do that, you've got to change the front and rear sprocket, and you need a spacer on the rear sprocket as well to make sure that everything lines up, and then you can fit a chain on it. And that was a big change for me. A lot of people said to me, well, why did you do that? Because obviously one of the advantages of the belt is that it's maintenance free, but belt drive actually absorbs quite a lot of the power, and so by changing to chain drive, chain is far more efficient than either belt or shaft drive in terms of energy loss. And so I reckon I've increased the power of the bike by probably about 10% just by changing it to chain drive, and it's quite noticeable. That I really do notice that increase in power. And whilst we're on this side, you can see that's I've made a leather cover on that side. It's the fuse box and what have you under there, but again it's just another leather cover which matches the other side. Now I do have some brown leather. The reason I made these side panels in brown, I've got some brown leather panniers which fit on the back here. I haven't got them on at the moment, but I do, if I'm touring, run with the Harley-Davidson brown leather panniers. And also I have a touring screen which clips on and off as well on the front. The touring screen just clips on here if I want to put it on, but I don't use that when I'm just running around. So that's a very quick look around the bike. 2008 Dyna Fat Bob. I do like it. I think it's a handsome looking bike. Looks like a proper motorbike to me. So having had a quick look around the bike, I'll hop on, we'll go for a bit of a ride, and I'll talk you through some of the good, the bad and the ugly of long-term Harley-Davidson ownership. So, as promised, here's my good, bad and ugly of Harley-Davidson ownership. Now, obviously, I'm a Harley-Davidson fan. I've been riding Harley-Davidsons for many, many years, and I've owned several. But I like to think I'm fairly objective about these things, and I certainly don't look at Harley-Davidsons through rose-tinted glasses as some owners seem to. You know, I'm perfectly happy to call out Harley-Davidson when I think that their bikes or their finish is pretty poor, but equally I will give Harley-Davidson praise where it's due. So let's get to it then. Start with the good points first. So this is a nice bike to ride, and that's mainly why I ride this bike and why I've kept it for so long. It's a very relaxing bike to ride, nice relaxing ride, laid back, and that's mainly due to the torquey engine on the bike. Now, I'll talk about torque again under bad points, but I want to put this forward as a good point. It is a very torquey engine, which makes for a nice relaxed ride. Also the geometry, the setup of it, and the whole feel of the bike when you're riding it is a nice relaxed feel, and I do like that. So my second good point is I think it's a good looking bike. I already mentioned this earlier when we were looking round, but it looks like a proper bike, and of course the way that a bike looks is very important to you as an owner. You want to own a bike that you enjoy looking at and you feel looks good, and I think Harley-Davidsons are, and I like this particular bike. You know, my third good point about this bike is that, and this is particularly being a UK owner and rider, I think this particular model, the Fat Bob, is very well suited for UK roads and UK riding. If you watch a lot of my videos, you see that most of my riding is on small, twisty roads with not particularly good road surfaces. I mean, this that I'm on at the moment is an excellent road surface, but a lot of the roads aren't. And I think the Fat Bob is well set up for that. It's compared to some of the other big tourers, which I have owned and ridden extensively, this is relatively light and manoeuvrable on these small roads. And so where are we? I think the fourth good point about the bike is maintenance is very easy. I do all the maintenance myself, and it's very straightforward. It's a very simple engine, very simple bike to work on. Things like oil changes, routine maintenance are very easy to carry out on this bike. So it's a very satisfying bike to own if you like doing your own maintenance. And so the fifth good point about the bike is, as with all Harley-Davidsons, it holds its value well. This bike is now 14 years old, and it's probably only worth a couple of £1,000 less than I paid for it 14 years ago. Unlike any other bike, Harley-Davidsons really do hold their value. I mean, when I bought this bike, I sold a previous bike which I'd owned for nearly as long. I'd owned that for 13 years, and I sold that for just £2,000 less than I bought it. And so that's why I say with confidence they really hold the value well. Okay, so the next good point. Well, yeah, you may think this is a good point, you may not. It's a Harley. And that's something you either get or you don't get. You know, if you get it, then you love it. You love the fact that it's a Harley, and that's why most people ride Harley. So I'll just leave it at that. My next point, and it's very important to this next point, I really want to make this one. This is mechanically has been a very reliable bike. I think that Harley-Davidsons get a lot of unfair stick from people, largely from people who've never owned them, who say, oh, they're unreliable, always breaking down. No, they're not. This is a very, very reliable bike. I've had very few problems with it, with a lot of riding over 14 years, and certainly mechanically. I mean, I will, when I talk about the bad and the ugly, I'll talk about some of the problems I've had, but the engine, no problems with that at all. It's been great. Another good point on this bike is the fuel range. It's got a 5-gallon tank, and it does pretty good fuel consumption, so you get well over 200 miles to a gallon from this bike, which is very respectable. And so my last good point then, I don't know what number this is, losing track, and that, again, this is another appeal of Harley ownership. They're really easy to customize and personalize. I think of any bike, Harley-Davidsons are the most customizable bike out there. I know this is something which other manufacturers like Triumph are really trying to follow follow Harley-Davidson's lead by providing lots of aftermarket bolt-on goodies you can get, but they really are copying Harley-Davidson there. Harley-Davidson have this nailed down. So if you want to make a bike your own, then Harley-Davidson is the way to go. There's lots and lots of things that you can change, aftermarket accessories and things from Harley-Davidson, but lots of other manufacturers as well. And so it's very easy to make lots of changes, and I talked about some of the changes I've made on this bike at the start of the video. Okay, so that's the good points, and I hope you noticed there were lots and lots of good points. But let's move on to some of the bad points then. Right, I have to say, the engine is just massively underpowered for its size. This bike has the twin cam 96 cubic inch engine in it, which in metric is 1,584 cc, so it's just under 1,600 cc's. The torque output, Harley-Davidson are very shy about the power output, but the torque output is 92 foot-pounds at quite a low 3,000 RPM. So, as I've already said, it's got a decent amount of torque, but when you look at the power figures in relation to the engine size, it's relatively low tuned. However, I do have to say that I can't understand why anybody would want to buy a Harley-Davidson for performance. You do not buy a bike like this for performance. If you want a performance bike, go and buy something else. That's not what it's about. So I think you can't buy a bike like this and complain then about the level of power. So I'm just pointing out that it's not hugely powerful for the engine size. However, I feel that it is plenty powerful enough for what I need, and I certainly have no inclination to spend lots of money trying to squeeze more power out of it, other than the obvious things like, you see, I've put the heavy breather air intake on it, and I've put the Vance and Hines exhaust, and that's just, you know, removing the emissions restrictions from the engine and letting it breathe naturally. But outside of that, I really have no inclination to try and up the power, because if I want more power, more performance, I'll just turn to a different bike for that. Anyway, enough said about that. Okay, the second bad point is it is outdated technology, and I think this is a fair criticism thrown at Harley-Davidsons. You know, that it's a very basic bike, is this, in all respects, but particularly when you look at things like the suspension. The suspension is extremely basic. Takes me back to bikes I was riding in the 1980s, and the engine design as well is very basic. However, and I'm trying to be balanced about this, I think there is a charm to that, and I quite like it. I like the simplicity and basic nature of the bike, particularly as I do my own maintenance and work on the bike. It makes it very easy to work on. So again, I'm not going to complain about that, I'm just pointing it out. Okay, so my next bad point then about these bikes, and that is that they are very heavy, unnecessarily heavy. They're built like tanks. Everything is over-engineered and overweight and oversized. So, for example, when I was showing you around the bike, I talked about the backrest and the luggage rack. And the standard Harley-Davidson ones are so heavy, and you start bolting stuff like that onto the bike, you're just adding so much to the weight of the bike. Fairly quiet this junction. Yep, we're off. So, you know, as I said, you know, I looked for lighter weight aftermarket options on the bike, and I've tried really hard not to add more weight to what is already a pretty weighty bike. Okay, so just a couple of bad points then. So finally, I'll move on to the ugly points. And these are real gripes that I have. So the first one is the finish. The finish, I think, is very poor. The paint on the front forks and on the front and rear fender started coming off very soon after I'd ride the bike. Literally only been riding the bike for a few months, and the paint on the front forks started chipping off, and on the engine case, particularly on the primary cover, mentioned that started losing paint on the primary cover. However, I have to say, and I'm trying to be balanced and fair in these comments, this bike is now 14 years old, and it's been ridden through virtually every winter here in the UK, which really, you know, gives bikes a pounding. And considering that it's been ridden through, you know, what, 12, 13 winters, it is holding up pretty well. I had these initial problems, you know, with the quality of the paint finish, but once I sort of sorted that out myself, and I'm not excusing Harley-Davidson in any way here at all, but having sorted those, here we go. Sorry, excuse me. And having sorted that out, yeah, it's lasted up fairly well. But my second gripe, my second ugly point is connected to that, and that is these bikes are just not built for UK weather conditions, particularly UK winter riding. And so I've had three very specific problems with the bike in relation to, you know, weather, or weather ingress you might call it. The first one is the speedo. Whenever it rains, water gets into the speedo, it mists up, and then it just packs in. And it packs in indiscriminately. And when I say the speedo packs in, I mean the whole system packs in, so the mileometer packs in. So if you ask me how many miles have I done on this bike, the answer is I don't know, because I've ridden it a lot with the mileometer and the speedo not working. And and then it might take 2 or 3 rides after I've been out in the rain for it to, you know, start working again properly. But, you know, 2 or 3 rides, probably out in the rain again. So it's been a persistent problem, and I know other people had this problem. The second issue with that is the rear light, and I explained this when I was showing you around the bike a minute ago, and that is that you know, there's this circuit board up behind the rear light where there's a hole access where the wiring goes through that just runs under the fender, so all the dirt and grime and wet from the road off the rear tyre just gets flicked up into this. Just an appallingly bad design. It strikes me that it's been designed for just riding in dry weather in California. I'm going to turn down here. I like this road down here. Anyway, and also a third problem that I've had, and I know many owners have had this problem, is the front brake master cylinder. Again, you just get wet, dirt and grime into the master cylinder, and it starts getting corrosion in the end of the cylinder, so that the piston doesn't return properly. The first sign you get of that is the brake light sticking on. You notice the brake light sticking on, and people tend to think, you know, understandably, oh, that's a problem with the brake light switch, and they're fiddling around with the brake light switch. In actual fact, it's a problem with the brake itself, and if it gets worse, your front brake performance is deteriorating. So, not very good design there at all. And then fourthly, wheel bearings. Again, another notorious problem with these fat bobs is the wheel bearings are not very well protected. I've had to replace the wheel bearings twice on this bike, just with them getting, you know, the winter dirt and grime wet in there, and then the bearings deteriorating. And well, obviously I changed them before they failed, but the first time I had to change them, they were pretty bad by the time I got to change them. So I lumped all of those gripes together into one point, which is that it is very poorly designed and built bike for riding in what I would call realistic conditions, which is, you know, UK conditions. And my final ugly point then, I put this down as an ugly, as a real gripe, is Harley-Davidsons are just too expensive for what they are, and all the parts for them are expensive as well. Anything with a Harley-Davidson logo on it is hugely expensive, and you know, I just feel that is a bit of a rip-off. However, again, trying to be fair and balanced, you could say the same for some other makes as well. So I used to have a BMW, and I would say the same for BMW as well. Most BMW parts were frighteningly expensive. So Harley-Davidson is not alone in that. But when you look at some other manufacturers that produce much more reasonably priced bikes, much more reasonably priced spares and parts and things, you do get this feeling that you've been ripped off a little bit with Harley-Davidson. Okay, so there you have it. That's my good, bad and ugly of long-term Harley-Davidson ownership, and obviously my comments are specifically directed towards the bike I'm riding at the moment, which is the Dyna Fat Bob. So if you have, or you're thinking of buying a Dyna Fat Bob, I hope you've found that useful and interesting, and if you're interested in Harley-Davidsons more generally, I think a lot of the points that I've made are more generally valid as well. So if you've made it this far, thank you very much for listening, riding along with me. Hopefully see you again next time. Bye.